Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Kia ora. I understand Parliament Service is currently investigating what's the future of the parliamentary TV broadcast. I mean, one idea is we could have a worm or some sort of vote ticker, because I think you would have seen that go backwards very, very fast after that contribution from the member Toe Henry. I think what the public of New Zealand heard there was a whole bunch of partisan politics, petty point scoring, personal attacks. I don't think the Kiwis want to hear that. When we're talking about the economy, they want to talk about ideas, a vision. They want to have a sense we're going forward, not this petty personal politics of the member. I think it's lost them a whole bunch of votes, Mr Speaker. So there's one idea to kick off this debate this morning. So I rise to speak on the Appropriation 2013-14 Estimates Bill and the second reading of the Imprest Supply Bill. Obviously it's a tremendously important debate to our country, to our Parliament. We're talking about the nature of the budget, a significant tool the government and the country uses as part of our economic future. And right now you can read it on the papers, you can see it in the international media, the economic challenges New Zealand faces right today. When you look at the issue of contaminated whey products and other dairy-based products, Mr Speaker, around the world, and the $13 billion of our dairy exports, we've got to be paying attention. Obviously, we need to be doing the basics first, which is protecting the health and safety, providing good information to New Zealand and domestic consumers. But I think it does put in stark relief the risks to brand New Zealand, 100% pure, which obviously the Chinese media has very strongly critiqued, and of course the economic dependency New Zealand has on this one industry. And in this debate, Mr Speaker, I want to touch on some of those broad-based economic issues facing us, which you can see consistently through the Fonterra dairy dependency we have in New Zealand. So in this debate, I want to touch on three things. The first is the Green Party's vision for our economy, our plan for the New Zealand economy, which is to deliver a smart green economy, lift our kids out of poverty, and clean up our waterways and our environment, because we can have all three of those things. Secondly, I want to touch on the range of Green Party contributions to show the broad brush of positive contributions the Greens have brought to this particular debate, and look at two particular areas I'm passionate on, which is seeing cleaner, smarter, cheaper energy for New Zealanders and a thriving ICT sector. So it's pretty good to be standing here this week after that 5% rise in the poll we saw over the weekend for the Green Party. It's pretty good to be standing here because we're an optimistic party, we're a positive party. We're not playing those petty partisan point-scoring politics games. We're getting on, proposing plans. We're out there proposing plans which are resonating with New Zealanders. We're offering them trust, which I think is in some decline when you look at the government benches. We're offering real solutions. We're not playing games. This is important. This is the future of New Zealanders. It's about jobs. It's about the quality of life. It's about standard of living. It's about whether Kiwi kids have shoes and jackets to go to school. It's about whether you can actually swim in a waterway. And if you look at the latest data, that iconic Kiwi experience of being able to go for a swim in New Zealand stream or creek, you just can't do it in many of our rivers and streams, and it's wrong. It goes against our core Kiwi values. So it's important that we address these issues. And look, we've got some significant structural economic challenges facing our country. It's more than just the deficit. It's more than, just the surplus, which is how the government has been putting this economic debate. What we've seen is a decline in economic competitiveness relative to other nations. We've seen growing debt, growing numbers of Kiwis out of work. Over the last 60 years, we've seen New Zealand steadily decline down those OECD rankings, and we're not seeing those solutions. We're running fast as we can just to keep up, to stay where we are, but still we keep slipping backwards. We work some of the longest hours in the OECD, yet we're still slipping backwards vis-a-vis other countries. And sure, you can point to Australia as the government benches are doing, but there the Australian government's actually woken up to the mining boom's over. The plan to just have an extractive commodity-based economy supplying China isn't a winner for Australia, and that's why they're trying to diversify away from it. So it's an important debate because we're talking about real issues like the structural health of our economy and the future of New Zealanders. So we've got real solutions to those challenges. When you look at the sectors we'd be supporting, we want to see a thriving ICT sector. We believe we've got a huge opportunity in clean energy, and that's what the experts say. When you look around the world, net international capital investment outstripped all the investment in fossil fuels and nuclear generation for electricity generation. It went into renewables, things like hydro, solar, wind. This is where we've got a niche. It's a $23 billion opportunity according to PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's about exporting clean energy, exporting ICT technology. It's about being a niche in clean tech. And this is where we should be looking, Mr. Speaker. It's what the late Professor Paul Callaghan was talking about. New Zealand needs to focus on its strengths, its niches, but instead what we see is this extractive commodities-based vision from the government, which is all about digging more holes for coal and mining, which less and less people are investing in and wanting to buy internationally, and trying to cram more cows onto our paddocks with all the risks we've seen so starkly this week. So while we're talking about addressing some of these challenges, we need to be looking at that massive current account deficit, but we also have to be addressing the environmental deficit, which has been growing more and more under the national government, and we need to be approaching the social deficit. What I heard from Jan Logie was that the top 5% of New Zealanders own 50% of the wealth in our country. We're not seeing ordinary Kiwis get ahead. National isn't working for ordinary New Zealanders. So when you look across all the Green contributions in this debate, Mr. Speaker, I think you've seen a very strong argument, a positive argument from the Green Party. Dr. Russell Norman talked about his plan to structurally balance the economy through things like a comprehensive tax on capital gains, excluding the family home, broadening the legislative mandate of the Reserve Bank to try and keep that Kiwi dollar under control, supporting Kiwi exporters and the productive economy. And then you see the capital market reform, including supporting Kiwi Bank. You see some good contributions there. Kevin Haig talked about health and how we should be planning for the future, not just for the short-term plan that Mr Ryle has. Catherine Delahunty talked about the priorities the government's got wrong in education, and they're wasting those precious education dollars on ideologically driven policy. Materia Ture talked about child poverty and the Greens package of solutions, from the in-work tax credit through to better housing for Kiwi kids growing up currently in poverty. We know there's more than 200,000 of them. Ken Graham talked about the Greens plan for global sustainability. We saw Eugenie Sage talk about the Greens plan for 100% New Zealand, actually paying lip service, not making it this marketing slogan, which is so being drawn in the international media, being called a festering sore by the state-run Chinese media. It's about that Kiwi value, being able to go for a swim in your stream or river. Dave Clendon talked about the Greens' prioritisation of spending in the justice system. Holly Walker talked about the Greens' solutions for housing in terms of building more state houses, in terms of supporting Kiwis into ownership, and thirdly about making sure those rental properties across the country, and I've seen many of these cold, damp, unhealthy rental properties, are healthy, are safe. So what we need is a minimum standard for our rental houses. Stephen Browning talked about the biosecurity risks facing our agricultural sector. I talked about our vision for cleaner, cheaper, smarter energy in New Zealand. Julianne Genter talked about the Greens plan to dig some holes. Now, the government always talks to the Greens are against digging holes as if digging holes was a bad thing. Actually, there are a few holes we'd like to dig. One of them is in central Auckland, down in the CBD. We want to build a CBD rail loop to transform the Auckland public transport network, to empower the Auckland CBD and to transform our biggest city's economy. So we've canvassed a range of positive solutions. In terms of ICT, we have massive growth here, but the government's not taking the potential. They're delaying things like the copyright review, which is empower and drive of economic development. They're doing things like making rules for chorus. And all New Zealanders will be paying the subsidies on their copper-based prices. We need a second internet cable, because while there is some good investment from the government in ultra-fast broadband, what we risk is having an ultra-fast intranet. We need to have more international connections so Kiwis can work in New Zealand. Because under national, what we see is Kiwis, the main export of New Zealand is exports in skilled Kiwis. What we need to do is have a richer New Zealand, with a positive plan going forward, with kids out of poverty, a safer, cleaner New Zealand, where entrepreneurs and Kiwis want to come back to New Zealand, where Kiwis can do their work in smart, high-tech niches, as Professor Callaghan was urging us to do, where Kiwis want to move back to New Zealand, but can still participate in the global economy and the global culture. So this is the Greens plan for the economy. It's a smarter economy that focuses on our strengths. It's a cleaner economy so we can have quality of life for New Zealanders and that valuable, pure brand. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, we're not playing those partisan politics games that you've heard in this debate from the other parties. What we're doing is putting forward a positive vision, and when you look at the polls, it's resonating with New Zealanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kia ora.
I call the honourable member Nikki Wagner.
Thank you very much.